Hi, and welcome to Clearing Homeschool Hurdles and Crossing the Finish Line. My name is Jana Cook, and I'm the community manager of Bookshark. Today, in this session, we're talking about socializing your homeschoolers, and I'm joined with Leanna Ampola. She is the founder of homeschoolanywhere.com. We're going to be bringing to you guys some helpful tips just to be able to help you see that this year of pandemic homeschooling has been different, but we have ways to make next year a ton better. Leanna, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'd love for you to just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your homeschooling journey.
Yes, I'm a Montessori trained elementary teacher. I taught for a few years, but then ended up homeschooling my children for 6 years. We were going to do it for 1 year, and we loved it so much we ended up doing it for 6 years before they decided to go back into an adolescent program. During that time, I started a Montessori enrichment program out of my home. I had to get a daycare license, and either 1, 2, or 3 days a week, children would come and learn with us in the home. I also ran a project group, which was gathering children together to do projects together, because what I realized is homeschoolers have a lot of chances to go to classes and go to adult-led things, but they don't have as much opportunity to work together independently. So that was the idea, to bring homeschoolers together. I also taught several classes in the community, and now I tutor math and run homeschoolanywhere.com, which is a calendar. It's startup. I'm starting up. It's a calendar of homeschool events. Hope to go nationwide.
Did you ever in your wildest dreams believe that you would be a homeschool mom?
No, no. And in fact, that's a great question, because when I was in Montessori training, I saw homeschooling as the opposite of Montessori, because Montessori is bringing large groups of children together and having them work together and learn together. And I thought, oh, homeschooling is just children alone. That's the exact opposite. But what I realized when I got into homeschooling is a lot like Montessori, in that you can go at the child's pace, you can follow the child, you can bring in all kinds of external learning opportunities that you can't get in a traditional classroom. It's actually, and you can use all kinds of materials. It's actually a lot like it. But no.
I bet that was very surprising to you to see those connections.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
I feel like traditional education is kind of kept us thinking in boxes, right? Like, here's public school, here's Montessori school, here's homeschooling, and there's a lot of division in that. But I think after this last year, a lot of people are seeing that there's not so much division, that there is things that kind of cross over and are very beneficial to children.
Yeah, I agree. And I think of homeschooling as, I mean, we called it sort of world schooling. You're just learning outside of a classroom, which is the way children and human beings learned for the vast majority of human history. And there's so much out there that we didn't get to experience this year.
I want to encourage our viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. And if you're watching this video as a replay and you have a question or comment, please email info@bookshark.com. We're going to start off by talking about, in terms of classes and events, how is homeschooling during a pandemic different from the regular years of homeschooling?
Man, it's so different. So much of homeschooling is the rich experience that children get outside of the house, not only going places, but with other children. And I don't want to forget that parents have had a very different pandemic experience as well. Homeschool parents have not experienced homeschool parenting the way it should be. I learned so much just from standing at park days with other parents, chatting and talking. So I don't want that to get lost. You haven't had a normal parent experience as a pandemic homeschooler either. So yeah, let me talk about the different ways children can learn. So you can learn inside your home with your family, right? Which is what we've been doing in the pandemic. You can learn outside the home with your family. And what I'll get to your question about classes. You can go to museums, you can go all kinds of places with your family. But then you can also learn inside your home with others. You can invite others into your home and have project groups and presentation sessions and all kinds of things. or you could go out and do things with other people outside your home. So really, we've only experienced a fraction. In terms of, my brain thinks in a very sort of systemic way. And so let me separate out some of the activities that we've missed out on during homeschooling. You specifically talked about classes and events. Let me talk about social groups just set up for homeschoolers. I belonged to a couple, or I belonged when we were homeschooling to a couple in my area here in Atlanta. And there are probably social groups in your area that meet your needs. If you haven't found them, go on Facebook groups and ask what's in your area. If you don't find something that meets your needs, you might consider starting a small one, even if you just start with park days. Just, hey, I want to get a group of teenagers together that share these sorts of, things in common. Let's have a park day on Thursday. Who's interested? Put it out there on Facebook and just see if anybody's interested. And in terms of the established groups, there are all kinds of events that go on. A lot of groups have park days where kids just go and play at the park. A lot of groups have classes. You can teach. Your children can attend. Some are drop off. Some are, stay on site. Park days classes. Some of them have graduation ceremonies. There's a prom that happens in our town. I have some notes here because I don't want to forget anything, so I'm just going to glance down at them. There are field trips that they plan, all kinds of things that go on in these social groups that primarily have been going on online. And I will tell you that online classes are nothing like in-person classes. They are, in-person classes are so rich with discussion and laughter and play. And I'll tell you, one class, I was teaching academic classes at these different co-ops. I taught botany at one, I taught geometry, geography exploration. And then one semester I kind of wanted to do it light. And so I taught games where kids would just come and play games. And I brought all these games, Sorry, Star Wars Life, just all these games. And I thought, they're not really going to be learning anything, but they'll be playing games. I guess they'll have fun together. I tell you, they learned so much. They learned how to organize themselves in a group. They learned how to problem solve, set up the game, learn the rules, problem solve. That was the biggest thing. They would come to me, I have a problem. I can't figure out, she's not playing right. I can't. And so I gave them some ground rules, like discuss what's wrong, talk about it, see if you can come to a conclusion, go back. Don't let me solve your problem. Go back and see if you can solve your own problem. And a majority of time they did. And it's every interaction in these social groups is valuable. Even park day. You think the kids are just playing. And I don't know if others' park days are like ours, but we would pretty much let the children organize themselves, solve their own problems, come to each other's aid. It was so beautiful to watch. And really the parents, we just stood back. In fact, I told my husband, when you go, just don't get involved. Just stand back unless they need us. If our child is crying, don't even go over to him. I mean, he was older. He was like 8 or 9. Don't even go over to him, right? Let them solve their own problems. And that is the way children, when I was young, I would just take my bike and go out for the day. And that's how children solve problems. So even if you think they're just playing, that's the natural way of learning. So all of these social groups have such that's one sort of category of activities.
So I will say, before the pandemic, my twin girls were coming in 13, 14, and we were still homeschooling. And we found a group that did social dances. And that was one of the things that people said, oh, well, your kids don't get to socialize. Your kids miss out on so many things. Well, first of all, how many kids who get to go to dances don't even participate, right? Like it's a small percentage at a school. But my girls, I was so excited to find this group because they were able to do a dance. They actually did several dances with this group as homeschoolers. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity. They're not missing out on anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, they might even get more socialization, I think, because they have more time to self regulate themselves. There is not an adult standing over them, telling them what to do every minute. And there are just free opportunities. One of the first times I went to my social co-op, we were under a covering, like picnic tables under a covering, and there was a playground. And being Atlanta near the summertime, it just started to pour, like it was downpour. And there were probably about 8 families left or so. It was later in the day. And I was talking to parents, and it was downpouring, and nobody moved. Nobody moved. We just kept talking. And the kids were just wildly playing, and they got into this little tunnel thing, and it was just fun to watch them be kids.
Yeah. I think you make a great point about parents because one thing that I have felt even as a seasoned homeschool mom, pandemic homeschooling, is we don't have that connection with other parents. You know, that sounding board, like, hey, this is what is going on with my daughter. And then a friend will jump in, oh, well, my daughter's doing the same thing, or my son had the same issue at that age. And so it kind of normalizes your life. But when everyone is in their own bubble, you kind of feel overwhelmed, like it's just me. I'm the only one that has this problem. We'll never get past this. And so the pandemic really has done a disservice for parents to have a community of homeschooling parents as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, some of my best friends are the homeschool parents I've met in the last few years, and um, homeschooling is tough. It can you have those great days, but you have a lot of tough days too, and you need that support, and you need to know you're not alone in wanting your children to maybe go back to school or something like that, right? You reach those moments, and that's key. And you also pick up so many resources just from talking to parents. Go out when things open up again. Go out and just talk to other homeschool parents, and your life will be so much enriched. I remember just one comment can change your whole trajectory. I was talking to a parent. I said, I mean, I'm a Montessori educator, but I still wanted my kids to be up to state standards. I said the Georgia standards are so confusing. I can't figure them out. And she said, we just use the Virginia standards, and which I recommend, by the way. And they're so much clearer. So I used that to make sure I didn't forget anything. Yeah, big thing.
I think I remember being a young parent and just having babies. And I think in our culture, it's a little bit more acceptable for young parents to get together, moms in particular, right? You see another mom, you start talking to her, you share stories about your babies. But somehow we've gotten this idea that as our children age, we kind of are losing some of that community. Like it's very typical for young moms to just start chatting with each other. But that's the same community that homeschoolers are trying to imitate as they are going through the adolescent years. And let me tell you, those teenage years, you need just as much as support,
I know, I
if
know.
not more.
And homeschooling can get harder during those years because you've got all these requirements to meet. Homeschooling in elementary can just be fun. You go to museums, you do all that stuff, but it gets a little more intense later years. So if you need a group of people your age, go out and find one.
So
Uh,
what are some ideas about you've talked about, like, you hit a little bit on classes and then socializing outside the home with some other families, but what are some other ideas you have for homeschooling parents this year?
yeah, absolutely. So, as many people probably know, museums, nature centers, even skating rinks and trampoline parks. Now, I live in the middle of a big city, but so there's all these things available. But all of these organizations have realized, hey, our facilities are empty during the week, and there's this whole body of homeschoolers out there. Why don't we offer homeschool days? And so homeschool days can be almost at any organization. Not just Don't just think museums and zoos. There's like I said, skating rinks. There's all kinds of places, all kinds of places. And if there's a place near you, like we have an aerials studio near me where they have the scarves and you do aerials and
Oh,
stuff.
fun.
Some homeschoolers wanted to set up a class there, so they just called them and said, "Hey, can I?" It takes a little work on behalf of one or two homeschool parents, to say, "Hey, would you be willing to offer a homeschool class if we get 5 kids together or something like that?" And they did. So don't just think about don't just find the homeschool days and homeschool events in your area. Think about what you can reach out and plan as well. The other component to museums and places like that is that most large organizations will have field trip opportunities, which means they're usually for public school folks. So you can look on their website and you can see, they have, the history of space exploration. And if you get a group together, you can go and, book that class, right? So I'm talking about regularly scheduled homeschool days and events, asking organizations to plan something, get a few people together, say, "Hey, would you have a homeschool class for us?" Or going on their regular, sort of the larger organizations, their field trips page. And there's all kinds of things you can book. When I had my own Montessori classroom, I booked an afternoon at the Atlanta History Center. And we went and we saw what life was like in 1850, right? And we went and we, touched the sheep and all that. But, there are those things that you can get a group together and plan. So those are some of the things that happen at the larger organizations. Let's see here.
I know when we were talking before, you and I, we kind of touched on some of those just basic things that parents can do with their kids that are fun. I have found that although grocery shopping can not be the most exciting activity, if I bring more than one of my children or my children want to bring a friend, it turns into a social event for everybody, and it's very simple things like that that I think we've kind of lost in this year because
Absolutely.
everyone has been so closed in because of the regulations.
Absolutely. And you can, as a Montessorian, I'm really big on teaching your kids independence. And, we used to go out and when my kids were, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, they got their own bank accounts. So they set up their own bank accounts. So when we went into the bank, I showed them how to fill out the form and everything, but they stood in line by themselves. Like I have a picture of there were a bunch of men in line. I think they had just gotten out of work or something. And my little girl's legs below her skirt, like she was in line with them to go up and do her own banking after I showed her how. Or in a grocery store, if you don't know where something is, or your child, like we would have a shopping list, and I'd say, "Okay, we need cinnamon. Where do you think the cinnamon might be? Do you think it might be here in the baking aisle? Let's find the spices." Can't find them. Well, go find an employee and ask them, right? And so these activities of practical life, and I stopped following my children, because if I went up with my children to the employee and my child said, "Excuse me, where is the cinnamon?" they would turn to me and answer. And so I stopped. I started sending them alone. But they can get their own library card. They can find books in the library, and if they can't do it, they can ask somebody. There's banking, there's the grocery store. Think anywhere you go, they can learn. And for older children, teach them how to read an insurance form. Teach them how to make their own doctor's appointments. I did not teach, there's a relative of mine, I did not teach them this. And she got into college and she had an issue, and she didn't know what to do. And so the issue got worse because she didn't know how to make her own doctor's appointment. So all these activities of practical life that you can do with your children we're missing as well. The other thing I want to discuss is inviting children into your own home. there is so much you can do, not just play dates, but there's so much you can do. You can set up like a presentation session, like maybe at the end of a semester, you could put the word out to one of your local Facebook groups or something like, hey, I'd like to invite kids in for a presentation session. And then if someone had done like a report on an astronaut or some sort of project, or they could collect these projects over the semester, and then they could come and you could maybe, I don't know, maybe it could be a potluck or something. So people get to mill, and then they would present their report or their project or whatever it is. And it gives them, opportunity to present and to feel proud about their work. Or you could meet in a park and do it. Have a little potluck lunch and do it in a park and then play afterwards to make it a little less formal. You can organize a sports day. I used to have children come into my home, and this was one of the most popular things I did. Kids would ask me, when's the next project group? I hosted project group where children would come into my house. I had to set it up in an pretty organized way, but children I know would, from the local group, would come into my house, and I had anywhere between 8 and 20 at a time. And we'd learn about a topic, and I'd put out all these craft materials that the parents helped me gather. And they would organize themselves into groups, pick a project, pick an end goal, get the craft materials, and work on these projects all day. They had lunch and playtime in the middle. Work on these projects all day, and at 2:30 parents would come back and they would present what they did around the theme of the day. We had the history of food, we had ancient China. The kids would pick the topics ahead of time. I've done about 30 of them. And a project can be anything from a song, an actual physical project, a play. One time we had some kids in my Montessori group, they took some giant paper. And if you ever want giant rolls of paper, I digress, but I love giant rolls of paper. Go to a restaurant supply site. And you ever see when you go into restaurants, like their tables are covered with white paper, like large white paper? That stuff is so cheap. And I think it's like $30 for a giant roll. Your kids can lay down on it, trace their bodies and everything. That's a great place to get large paper. So some kids made a life-size giant squid. And it's like, they're long. It's stretched all the way down my driveway with this giant paper. And they just had such fun with it. And when my husband got home, I said, hey, he said, what happened today? I said, we had a giant squid in our driveway. And he just really casually said, a real one? Because I had so many cool things. I had so many fun things going on. He thought maybe I actually had a squid in my driveway.
See the kind of expectation you created for your family, that wouldn't have been odd for your husband to know that there could have been a live one in his driveway.
Or a dead one, I guess.
Well, yes, a dead real one. It looks like we have a few questions. It looks like the first one is talking back to the Facebook groups about getting involved in social things with your homeschool kids. Someone had said, is it easy to get into the groups? Someone told me that these groups are close-knit families coming together since their kids are very young. And so I would just say that traditionally that may have been true, but within this last year, and I would say even the last few years with homeschooling kind of changing in its dynamic as the years have gone on, that just putting it out there in a Facebook group saying, hey, this is the area I live in, or these are the age of my children. Is there somebody who, has similar age children that we could get together? You could start really small. But just going and putting in homeschooling in either the town that you live in, the county, or maybe a big city that you live by, and then start looking for pages that way is just one way that I would say. What do you think, Leanna, in answer to that question?
And is that the question is how to find social groups in your area, and are they sort of
is it easy to get into, to kind of, are they accepting of new members, maybe is a better way for me to describe that question to you.
The ones that I've come across have been very accepting of new members. I mean, I'm sure it runs the gamut. If you go and you or your child don't feel comfortable, um, I would agree with you. Put the word out there. What looking for the range of social groups or starting one really, very simply. Like you were saying, just on a basic level. Let's get together in the park and you grow friendships. I would hope that most homeschool groups are accepting. Particularly, I think that now everybody's coming out of quarantine. There's going to be this huge influx. And I wouldn't be surprised if these social groups that maybe were insular with the same people in the past have an influx of new members.
Yeah.
And can make people feel comfortable.
Yeah. I think about just different community groups that I've been in all the years that I've lived in the same area here in Colorado. And there have been times where I've gone to one and I'm like, yep, this one isn't for me. And
Yeah.
I've had to, it's like visiting, right? You visit a group and see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, then you move on. And don't be discouraged if you have to go through a couple of them till you find the one that really is a good fit for you and your children. Another question, this one's from Mary. She says, struggling to find social groups for her introverted oldest child in 7th grade. They've homeschooled on and off over the years. She's going back to public in the fall because it takes her a while to create friendships. So many homeschool events that are only once a month, and that's hard to make connections. And I would absolutely agree. So she's asking, what are some suggestions for teens who need some friends? And I think that's a great question.
Yeah. And maybe if your child's introverted, entering a large group for park day is pretty overwhelming. I would say put the word out there on Facebook to see if there are any kids perhaps her age who share some some similarities and interests, and maybe go on a hike or just meet in the park, one or two people at a time. If there's some connection there, or you could even meet, I wouldn't meet online. I don't know. And if you don't know them, you might not want to have them in your home right away, but something real informal, like let's go have a picnic and walk in the park. And maybe you can set an end time, like we'll do it 1 to 2 o'clock. And that way, if there's not a connection, you can leave at 2. But if there is a connection, you could stay. And then eventually, maybe invite them into the home to do some projects together. If they have an interest in animals, maybe they could, do a research together on an animal or do a project together or do, if they love science, they could come together to do a timeline of something, like something in history or something in nature, timeline of the evolution of something, or
Sure.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. I like that idea. I was thinking when you were talking that maybe I know our library lets you reserve a study room. So if it is, if you put it out on Facebook and it's not somebody that you've met before, you're more of an acquaintance than a friend. And I love putting it in the idea of a school project. So don't say I think I found a friend for you, right? Because I have teenagers and that would not go over well. But hey, so-and-so's son needs to get this done and you're working on the same subject. So we're going to get together at the library and you guys are going to do it together. And 2 heads are better than 1. And, and see if it clicks that way. And she was saying non-Facebook ideas. Yeah. I would go to the library for sure. I know, again, it's been different because it's a pandemic. So we have Lego clubs and cooking clubs and a lot of clubs that meet at the library locally, that you could find something that has similar interests, something that your child's if they really like games, whether it be online gaming or actually board gaming, if your library doesn't do that, like Leanna said, you can actually set that up where you could reserve a room. They'll put out an announcement if it's just a board game that your child really likes to play, and see if they can get interest in bringing some other people in to play that game. Knitting, if they have a hobby. But I like the idea of sneaking school in there at the same time, that, hey, this is a project that we're going to work on. And then you just find some people to come in, and then naturally some friendships could start, or not. And you might have to do it a couple times until you find some.
And I think, yeah, and I don't mean to spend too much time on Facebook. If you Google homeschool social groups in your area, hopefully some would come up, and you might reach out to the head of that organization and explain what you're looking for. Are there, we're all coming out of quarantine, are there a few kids there that you think, here's what my daughter likes, and here's who she is. Is there something, and I don't know if it's a daughter, I apologize if it's a son, is there someone in your group that might be a good fit? We'd love to go on a hike or get together. It has been difficult. It's difficult to find the social groups in your area unless you Google them, which is one of the reasons why I started Homeschool Anywhere. But that's, it can be difficult. But keep trying.
I would say possibly another resource, if you do have a school district homeschool liaison, that might be another resource where you can just reach out to your school district and ask if they have a homeschool liaison. Then that particular person would know other homeschool families within your area, and they might be able to connect you that way too.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Also, if they have an interest, for example, if they love to sew, there might be a person who teaches sewing classes in your area, and maybe you just want a small one, like 3 people. Maybe they're willing to do it for 3 or 4 people, and you can reach out to the social groups and say, hey, is anybody interested in joining this sewing group? These organizations love it when people reach out to them and want to, have their skills.
Yeah.
Use their skills.
And thank you, Mary, because I think that's a question a lot of parents would like to have heard that answer to. All right. So my next question for you is, what are some of the activities that normally happen for homeschoolers when they're not in a pandemic? So, you've talked about stuff that you've done in the past, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what you're finding now on your website when you're putting it together. What's a typical year look like for activities?
You will have, museums, zoos, nature centers, all of those places doing homeschool days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like maybe one day a month or twice a month where you can go to their organization. The Atlanta History Center had one, for example, here in Atlanta, and you would go and they'd have sort of a lineup. And I like it when it's tiered by age, because homeschoolers have very different needs than the elementary schoolers. And you could go and you could just choose which classes, which little, 45-minute sessions you wanted to go to, meet Benedict Arnold and, all that. And they would have a theme, and it happened once a month, and it was a great homeschool day. So look around your area for all of these, homeschool days and sessions. There are, of course, the social groups have classes, field trips, all of those events. There are also hybrids that may have been homeschool hybrids, where you might take classes 1 or 2 days a week to fulfill a bunch of requirements, maybe for homeschoolers high schoolers or something like that. And then, the rest of the week is off for creative and other kinds of work. So those hybrids, a lot of them went online, but those are great places to go and to, if your child wants to take a class or 2 or something like that, places that offer, specifically for homeschoolers, will offer various classes. Of course, now at this time of the year, mostly for next academic year, on our calendar at least, you'll see mostly online classes and hybrid classes, because Most of the museums and places like that will set their schedules during the summertime for the next academic year for homeschool days and things like that. Right now, they're kind of focused on summer camps. So in the middle of the summer, start looking for those homeschool opportunities at your local museums and zoos. One of the reasons I started Homeschool Anywhere is because I realized all of these parents are going to the zoo website and the nature center website and all this. I thought, wouldn't that be nice if there was a central calendar where all of these homeschool events could reside and people could find them? So we're in Atlanta and Austin right now, but I can talk about that later. There's also, so those are, there's a lot of activities that are planned by other people. But there are also a lot of activities that happen once you get into a social group or once you have a small group of friends. For example, one of my friends, there's a small cheese factory near us. And it's like 2 rooms. It's not a factory. It's just a little, like in a strip mall. And they make cheese. And so she said, would you give our homeschoolers a tour? And she was ecstatic. And of course she put out a little cheese spread. And of course we left with, we bought a bunch of cheese and stuff. We didn't have to, but of course we did. And it was just amazing. We did the same thing with Arden's Gardens juice. They make Arden's Gardens juices near us. We did the same thing. There was a chocolatier, like a little strip mall chocolate shop. And so we asked if we could do something there. And it's like $15. We got a group together, $15 a child, and they got some chocolate and, she showed us talked about different chocolate and how it's made and all of that stuff. So there's not only, activities in your area, but of course activities you can plan. I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself now, but you can even go behind the scenes at different businesses. If your child, whatever your child's interested in, if your child's interested in animals, you could ask a local veterinarian, can my child shadow someone for a day there? Those kinds of things are so important. Just learning out in the world and learning how the world works.
Right. And I think that's something that goes back to your training where you were just saying that like being into Montessori training, that you believe that learning does happen outside, right? And I think that because of the pandemic, we've been so focused on learning inside our home and we're homeschooling, right? Because everyone has been quarantined or under some type of restriction. So I think that reiterating that there's so much learning to be done outside the home. It doesn't have to all be, we homeschool, so we sit at our kitchen table for 6 hours a day and we stare at each other and we get mad and nobody wants to do anything. I mean, with the weather, depending on your region, getting, starting to warm up, take your books to a park. And then you might see another homeschool family that's doing the same thing. And now you have a natural opportunity to make a connection with somebody in your area.
Go to the library during the middle of the day. Go to the grocery store during the middle of the day. See who's around. We actually met some homeschool friends from just being at the library at the same time. Mm-hmm. There's so much to be done. And, after we finished our first year of homeschooling, my daughter was finishing first grade, going into second grade. And I asked her, what would you like to do differently in second grade for homeschooling? And she said, I want to stay home more. She was over it. But volunteer activities are also a really great way to bring kids together. And again, it's for the person who said their child was introverted, this is a great way. I took my Montessori group. We volunteered at a local nature center. And of course, we couldn't work with the animals, but they had us do yard work. And then afterwards, we came in and they gave us a tour of all the animals and let them hold a snake. And, that was just really satisfying. Another time we went out and we just picked up trash. And we just picked up trash and, they all had gloves and pokers and stuff. It was safe. And then we weighed it at the end and they were so proud. They picked up like over 100 pounds of trash.
Wow.
Just, there are things like that. There are also things like, for example, if you're interested in local history, cemeteries are a great place, like historical buildings, cemeteries, all of those places. Basically, anywhere that has, and anywhere can be a learning opportunity, is I guess is what I'm saying. Whether they host it or you have to set it up, or you bring kids into your own home. I had my kids wanted to do some dissections at one time, and it's always more fun to do it with kids. So we invited some of our friends. We went to the farmer's market and we got whole fish, and I had diagrams, and they just, some kids didn't really want to touch it, but they could watch. And we had a dissection day, and then they played in the yard, and it was just fun.
Yeah. I love the idea too of volunteering because it's helping build into our children this idea of civic responsibility and taking ownership and pride for where you live and the things that go around. Again, we're emerging from this year long of being isolated from even our neighbors and family and friends. So coming out and with the restrictions starting to lift, I love the idea of just picking up trash. Like, hey, put a sign on your neighborhood light pole that says this time, this day, a bunch of us are getting together and we're going to pick up trash. And so just showing your kids that, we do have a responsibility to the places that we live. We should take pride in ownership of where we are and our community. And so definitely reach out to your town as well to look for volunteer opportunities. I know in the last year, there's been people in nursing homes and assisted living. And while we can't get into those places, there were cards made. My girls and I, we made cards, and they were able to quarantine them for a couple of days so to make sure they were safe. And then they passed it on to people who weren't having interaction, the regular interaction with people. And so just simple things like that make a huge difference in homeschooling, lifelong learning, in community awareness. That, it's funny when people say that homeschoolers aren't socialized, I laugh. Like your daughter who's like, can we just stay home? My kids are like, please let us just have a day where we don't have something to do, because I was so excited. I'm like, there's so much to do. There's so much to do. And that's why one of the reasons and the goal behind this session was to show parents that if this was your first year homeschooling, you really did miss out on some of the beautiful reasons we do homeschool our children, to have these freedoms that none of us have had during this year.
I remember sitting in high school and looking out the window. I went to, just regular public high school, and thinking, I wonder what it's like out there. That's so sad. Our children get to live in the real world, and they get much more comfortable with adults as well. I was going to say something. Oh, I was going to say about the nursing home. So I connected our local homeschool group with our local nursing home. And we went for about 3 years, once a month, and just did crafts with the residents or played bingo. They were serious about their bingo.
They love their bingo.
And there were some residents that were blind, and the children would put their things on the bingo cards, and it was so wonderful, and they got so much out of it. Some places will turn you down for volunteering or have all kinds of rules. That's fine, age rules. Just keep looking around until there's something that they will let you do.
Yeah. And what a beautiful opportunity for intergenerational learning. I mean, write that down on your transcript, right? Like that your children were involved in that. I think that's something that is missing sometimes, even in other types of schooling, the idea that you can do that. So let's talk about homeschoolaanywhere.com, this exciting website that you have developed to help parents find connection, outside of, like Mary was saying, Facebook.
Yes. Yeah. Because nobody's, not everybody's on Facebook, and let's be real, it's kind of a time suck in some ways. Facebook can suck you in. But, when I was homeschooling, I thought, there's so much out there. And I have to go to every single website and find it out, or just happen to come across it on a Facebook post. And at the same time, I was running my Montessori program. So occasionally we were full most of the time, luckily, but occasionally there would be spaces, and I would want to, let homeschoolers know about the spaces in my Montessori program. And, the social groups in my area wanted to fill their own classes. And so they did not want to share my information. And this was back even a few years ago when Facebook groups weren't even as robust as they were today. And I was like, how do I let homeschoolers know I exist? So I realized organizations, and I talked to some of my friends that offered classes, and they said, I have the same problem. I can't reach homeschoolers. So there's no way for the organizations to reach homeschoolers, no way for homeschoolers to figure out everything that's going on. I thought, why don't I start a website, which is a central calendar of homeschool activities and classes? And there's a lot on there that's not homeschool too, but you can learn in, in anything. There might be sewing classes that happen after school, but great. But, a central calendar where organizations can post homeschool activities and homeschoolers can find them all in one place and search by cost and by age and by location and all of that. So we launched for homeschoolers January 1st of 2020. And we had over 1,000 events on the calendar before the pandemic. It was we had launched in Atlanta and Austin, Texas, just because I had to choose two areas. It's very labor intensive to contact all these organizations and let them know who you are. Who are you? We don't know who you are, and we don't know what you do. And so, and I have 3 homeschool moms that have been working with me part-time. And so we started in Atlanta and Austin, and then the pandemic hit. And so we pivoted to include online classes and events, which is probably most appropriate for most of these viewers are not in the Atlanta and Austin, Texas metro areas. So what we're trying to do now is, organizations got really sort of thrown off by the pandemic. And so we're trying to get in touch with everybody again to enter their next year's homeschool classes. We're not really focusing on summer, more like academic year homeschool stuff. So if you go to the fall classes, in the fall, it's mostly online classes right now, because remember I mentioned the in-person stuff doesn't come into play. And I'm trying to figure out a way to expand more quickly, because I really want to, my mission is to enhance the educational opportunities for homeschoolers through this website, and to help connect them with so many, many more rich opportunities. And I don't just want to be in 2 cities. I'm trying to figure out how do I spread. And let me tell you, if you're ever thinking of developing a website, be prepared, because it has been a lot more work than I thought it would be. But now it's finally in place, and it's there. I just need to let organizations and homeschoolers know about it.
Yeah.
So, and maybe I don't know, maybe I can reach out to homeschoolers and have them, if homeschoolers want it to come in their area. I've been trying to think of ways I can get homeschoolers involved, because I don't know what's going on in Kansas City, right? I mean,
Right.
Someone in Kansas City knows. So, maybe I can get someone on the ground there to really, get the organizations excited. It's kind of the chicken and egg thing.
Right.
Homeschoolers don't want to come until we have the events on the site, and the organizations, are like, how many homeschoolers do you have on your site? Is it worth it for me to? So I've personally entered over 2,000 events on the site, just
Goodness.
myself. But I'm trying to get these groups together, so that you can my goal is that homeschoolers can go on this calendar, and it's empowered and empowering the children, like sort of in a Montessori way. Empowering children can go on there. They know what to do better than we do. They can search by age and cost and all of that, and find the things that ignite their passions. Maybe they find here's an online class that I'd really like to take, and parent wouldn't ordinarily, think to think that. So that's the idea behind what I'm doing. And there's also lists of organizations on there too, businesses in the local areas. So if you want to plan a trip somewhere, you can say, if you want to plan a trip, or a class at a sewing, you could, type in sewing and find organizations in your area. We don't have that keyword search bar up yet, but it will be soon.
So
So
it's interesting that you launched this right before the pandemic, but what a great opportunity to get an online presence in the midst of only being able to be online so that it can reach anyone throughout the entire United States and possibly beyond our borders. When you were talking about, maybe having your child find something that interests them, my youngest is in a tap class and they actually get to perform tonight. And so I thought she would be so excited. And I was like, "Are you so excited for your performance?" She's like, "Not really." And I was like, "Well, why are you tapping?" She goes, "Because I like to do it." In my mind, you're doing it because the culmination is to this performance. Like you're going to perform. And I was like, "Just because you like to do it?" She's like, "Yeah, I like knowing that I know how to do that." Blew my mind. I mean, here I am, a homeschool mom, almost 5 years under my belt. And I thought for sure she would just blossom in this performing, and it's not at all. She's just happy to do it. And I'm constantly, as a homeschool parent, learning about my children day by day.
absolutely. And I would say, oh gosh, everyone out there, just be good to yourselves. It's tough. And it's been 5 times as tough during the pandemic to homeschool because there's not all these fun things. There's all the work and no fun. Not no fun, but much less fun and much less interaction for your children and for you. So, be good to yourselves. I mean, there were days when I wanted to put my kids in the car, drive them to the nearest public school and drop them off crying and fill out the forms and leave. And
Yep.
I'm a trained educator too. And there were times when I thought, I don't know what I'm doing, but they'll be fine. Just give them a wide range of experiences, expose them to as much as you can. Try to adjust, if they're really hesitant, try to adjust your learning to their learning style. And, I know that the many homeschool parents have gotten a lot of pushback, especially this time of year. It's like, I'm done. Children are done. You're done. But in a regular homeschool year, that work will be broken up and supplemented by so many other things. It's easier to say, okay, we're going to do a half an hour of math and then go to park day than to say, okay, we're going to do a half an hour of math and then nothing's going to happen,
Right.
So just be good to yourselves and try to adjust to what you can do for you. And if the year's done, be done. And here's the thing I want to say. When your kid goes to school, there's school and there's not school. But when you homeschool, or I call it world school, everything is an opportunity for learning. So you're going to have so many experiences this summer, whatever you're doing this summer, they're learning. It's not like you've got to get out of that mindset of they're in front of a worksheet and they're learning, or a computer or whatever. They're in a class and they're learning, or they're not learning. That is not true. They can learn anywhere, anytime. You can change anything into a learning opportunity. Oh, look at this really interesting leaf. Look around me. I've taught botany. I love botany. Look around at how many different kinds of leaves there are here. Look at that. Look at this shape and this shape and this shape. I mean, anything can be, you can get little things in there, but just be good to yourself. That's what I would say, especially at this time of the year.
Absolutely. This is an interesting time of year in a non-pandemic homeschooling world. It's everybody's done, and you may still have some pages left in your textbook or worksheets that didn't get done, but that is one of the beauties of homeschooling, is it doesn't all have to be complete. by May 30th, right? So, Leanna, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and speaking to our audience about homeschoolanywhere.com, about your experiences homeschooling your family and being a part of a homeschool community there in Atlanta. Audience, we want to thank you for being here. If you have any questions for Leanna, we do have her contact information provided for you. She'd be happy to answer those questions. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next session. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.